Hello again, it's Sam Reed, the president of WILSA, the Wood Island Life Saving Station Association. Our 501c3 charity has been restoring the historic life-saving station in Kittery Point, Maine for the past 8 years. The restoration of the 1908 building is nearly done, and we will soon welcome the public to a maritime museum, will be available for events, and will also offer overnight stays in a really cool docent program. We plan to be open in the summer of 2024. This was a special place where brave men called surfmen would row out in winter storms to help save mariners in distress. Rowing in a storm in the winter to help other people, it's certainly something worth preserving. This past fall, September of 23, WILSA hosted a 4-day annual conference. But that conference wasn't for WILSA, it was for another charity, the U.S. Life-Saving Service Heritage Association. WILSA's been working hard to use Wood Island Station to help other charities, and this was a great example. There was no charge to use the life-saving station for that group. We call this focus for WILSA, Helping Others Then and Now. That slogan makes the point that what the surfmen were doing 100 years ago and what many local charities are doing today are both just trying to help others. The Heritage Association is made up of experts, historians, volunteers, owners of stations, people who have restored stations, people who collect artifacts, all sorts of people who care deeply about early Coast Guard history. If the early Coast Guard subject interests you or your organization, there'll be information provided at the end of this video for how to get involved or how to support the Heritage Association. The Heritage Association is looking for volunteers who want to work on membership coordination, its web page, which is fabulous, social media outreach, and its newsletter. Or just send along a little money to become a member and receive great invitations to amazing events like the one on Wood Island. So don't be shy and welcome aboard. Over the 4 days, the conference attendees enjoyed touring the active duty Coast Guard station at Merrimack River and on the Piscataqua River. The group also visited the Custom House Maritime Museum, Lowell's Boat Shop, the Wooden Boat Building Program at Trape Academy, and the very special privately owned pair of stations at Biddeford Pool, Maine, called Fletcher's Neck. We also took a good look at the Gundalow Piscataqua. Thanks to all of the organizations that welcomed the Heritage Association and gave such great tours. Also, there was a reception for the conference attendees at the Atlantic Grill in Rye, New Hampshire, where U.S. Coast Guard Rear Admiral John Mauger, the commander of the 1st District, spoke about current challenges and opportunities for his 11,000 Coast Guard men and women in active duty between New Jersey and Canada. But the really big highlight of the entire thing was September 23, when the Heritage Association spent the whole day on Wood Island. It started with boat rides for all attendees out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire to the island. Then there was a business meeting for the association. Vicki Stevens, representing the remarkable Hull Life-Saving Station Museum just south of Boston, presented images from a rare collection of glass plate slides entitled Speaking of Courage. At the turn of the previous century, the wife of the head officer of that station at Hull, Mary Evelyn Sparrow, created these images as well as the exact script to be delivered when viewing the images. That collection had been donated to Hull by the remarkable life-saving service artifact collector Dick Bonisar, one of the founders of the Heritage Association and that organization's first president, beginning in 1996. When that concluded, the group stepped outside of the station to see something even more rare. A crew of a dozen reenactors from the Chickamaucomico Life-Saving Station and Museum on the Outer Banks of North Carolina near Cape Hatteras had come to Kittery to do something that hadn't happened in Maine in a long, long while, maybe 80 years. They were there to do the breeches buoy drill. Back in 2019, Wood Island built a pole that looks like a flagpole, and it is a flagpole, but it isn't only that. It's called a wreck pole or drill pole, and the design has a special feature. It's supposed to look and act like the mast of a wrecked ship. The idea was to use the pole to practice, to drill, and be ready for emergencies. All life-saving stations used to have them. There was one at Wood Island that was demolished long ago. The new pole at Wood Island had never been used for a drill like this before. Although Wood Island and all life-saving stations were ready to use boats to try to assist mariners in distress, they also had some other life-saving techniques. A small cannon called a Lyle gun was used to shoot a projectile tied to a long, thin line. That projectile and line would be shot far up in the air, well past the wrecked ship, with the intention of having the line become caught up in the rigging. Then men aboard the ship would use the line that had been shot, called the whip line, and pull up a heavier line. That bigger line, called the hawser, would be tied off and brought tight with block and tackle on shore. Then a life ring with a pair of pants in it, the breeches, would be attached and used to safely bring men from the wrecked ship to shore, or in the case of the drill, from the flagpole to the ground. It was just like a modern zip line. All of that required a great deal of practice, and it was all timed by the head officer called the keeper, who gave direction to the surfmen. The idea was to see how quickly the gun, the lines, the block and tackle, and the life ring could all be set up and used. That training was for the men to be prepared in case a real emergency, a wrecked ship, needed immediate assistance. The surfmen of Wood Island Station performed many rescues and saved many lives when it was in active duty from 1908 to 1948. A rescue using the breeches buoy was captured by Winslow Homer in his well-known painting Lifeline from 1884. What's important to understand was that very few places in the U.S. still know how to shoot a line at a pole using a cannon to help save lives. There are only 3 or 4 places left. When the U.S. Life-Saving Service was at its height in the early part of the 20th century, all of the stations, more than 200 of them, all of them shot Lyle guns with projectiles and lines at their drill poles every week to be prepared for a real emergency. Chickamaucomico Museum is recognized as the most regular and most authentic reenactors of the breeches buoy drill in the country. Wood Island, naturally, would love to follow in their footsteps and learn from them. If Wood Island could become a new place that knows how to shoot the Lyle gun and manage all of the lines, that would be outstanding. Wilsa wants to keep that knowledge, that heritage, alive, and this event was an important first step in doing exactly that. Having the public visiting Wood Island Museum in the future to watch the breeches buoy drill regularly is a tremendous goal. Larry Grubbs was the keeper for the drill, and he looked and acted the part perfectly. His crew mustered in the station in period costume and came outside in single file line. They had brought their beach cart all the way from North Carolina. They set up the Lyle gun on the ground and shot the projectile, and the whip line became caught up in the arms of the pole as they had hoped.
Stay on the inside when I catch it. The charge is being introduced to the gun. Well. Good? Yeah. I'm obligated to tell you that this thing is loud. Ready?
goes. I got the line.
Beautiful.
It all went exactly as planned. Men quickly climbed the pole and tied off everything. The block and tackle were set up and the hawser was pulled tight. A man slid to the ground and was rescued. It was over in only a few minutes. What a milestone for WILSA and the restoration of Wood Island Station. As soon as that drill ended and the men began to put away their gear, another amazing event unfolded. The U.S. Coast Guard sent a Jayhawk helicopter to Wood Island from Cape Cod to show the Heritage Association Conference what modern-day rescues look like. They were there to help some of the active duty men and women of Station Portsmouth Harbor receive valuable training time aboard their 47-foot rescue boat. That boat and its crew came to Wood Island to watch the breeches buoy drill. They then supported the helicopter as it practiced pulling someone out of the ocean. This is called Search and Rescue Training, or SARS. The helicopter did some flybys of Wood Island Tower in celebration as it departed. What a great event. When all that excitement had ended, WILSA launched its own historic rescue boat on its restored marine railway. The Mervyn Roberts is a Type SR pulling surf boat from the 1930s, and after it launched into the Piscataqua, I gave rides to the conference attendees. That boat is an 8-oared rowing boat, but we didn't try to row it that day. We just turned on its very cool all-electric engine and silently motored around Wood Island. That boat is extraordinarily rare, and Wood Island is so happy to be the only restored life-saving station in the USA with a marine railway coming directly into the station building. We've even tracked down documentation that this exact kind of boat was in service at Wood Island. What was so magical was having the many people who are former or current board members of the Heritage Association there that day. They have worked hard to preserve early Coast Guard history for decades. Wick York asked loads of hard questions and was so impressed. Penny Watson had not been to Wood Island since the restoration began, and she was floored with what she saw. Kim Mann was so happy to see it all, she was practically giggling. Yvette Dills was all smiles. Steve Martinhouse was like a kid in a candy store. I forgot to mention, I'm also the current president of the Heritage Association Board of Directors. For me, it was so rewarding to welcome this group of experts to Wood Island and see how much they enjoyed it all. It was also really great to have representatives from many of the restored life-saving station museums in the USA in attendance or by Zoom. Hull, Nantucket, Amagansett, Chickamaucomico, Nahant, Ocean City, New Jersey, and others. There are only a dozen or so restored life-saving station museums in existence in the country. There were also owners of some private stations at the conference. Cape Elizabeth and Quoddy Head stations were there, to name just a few. Lastly, on the Sunday morning, a small group from the Heritage Association met at the Riverside Cemetery in Newcastle, New Hampshire. Chaplain Floyd Grace from the U.S. Coast Guard read a benediction at the graves of 4 early surfmen of Wood Island Station. Special bronze markers indicating that they had been members of the U.S. Life-Saving Service were installed. So all in all, the Heritage Association Conference for 2023 was a huge success. The weather was even quite decent. A lot of what southern Maine and coastal New Hampshire have to offer in terms of its rich maritime history were put on display. But most of all, the legacy of who the surfmen were and what their duties had been were celebrated and honored. That remarkable heritage of risking one's own life to save others is being kept alive at Wood Island Station for future generations to learn about. I can't wait for the next conference in the fall of 2024 in Michigan. Please consider supporting financially or volunteering for the U.S. Life-Saving Service Heritage Association. They represent something very special. Okay, feel free to also support Wood Island Station too. Thank you so much for listening.